Alright everyone, hello. I'm sitting in a different location in my apartment right now. I'm currently in my rocking chair, so whenever you hear there we are. Yeah, you might hear a squeak occasionally. That's just me chilling in my rocking chair because I felt like being in my rocking chair today. Anyway, today was, oh shit. Is this thing on? Is this thing on? Hold on. Is this thing on? Okay, there we go. I have my phone out to make sure that things are going smoothly. Oh my goodness. What a way to start a stream. Well, at least I figured it out now instead of later. But yeah, happy Father's Day, everyone. I was partaking in the Father's Day activities myself. Went to go see my daddy. And he cooked up some burgers for all of us to eat. My grandpa was there. He brought a very nice pie along with a nice cake. And yeah, fun times had for all. But enough about me. Let's get into today's subject. And we are talking about Christopher S. Claremont, aka probably the most famous X-Men writer. And by the way, if you hear a little squeaky noise like that, that's because I am currently in my rocking chair because I felt like being in my rocking chair today. So apologize if you find that annoying, but I just wanted to be comfortable right now. So anyway, let's get into this. We're going to start with the Wikipedia page, and instead of reading out the interviews, we're just going to react to a couple of different interviews he gave, and we might do a we might dive a little bit into one of the longer interviews, because a lot of these are like an hour, 2 hours long, and I don't just want it to be that long. Anyway, we'll get there when we get there. Alright. But first, we are going to start with Wikipedia. Alright, Christopher S. Claremont. He was born November 25th, 1950, and he is still alive. Yay! Is an English-born American comic book writer and novelist. Claremont is best known for his 16-year stint on Uncanny X-Men from 1975 to 1991, far longer than that of any other writer, during which he is credited with developing strong female characters as well as introducing complex literary themes into superhero narratives, turning the once underachieving comic into one of Marvel's most popular series. During his tenure, X-Men was the best-selling comic book in the world. And then Grant Morrison came in. Oh dear. During his tenure at Marvel, Claremont co-created numerous X-Men characters, such as Rogue, Psylocke, Betsy Braddock, Kitty Pryde, Shadowcat, Phoenix, The Brood, Lockheed, Shi'ar Imperial Guard, Mystique, Destiny, Selene, Reverend William Stryker, Lady Mastermind, Emma Frost, Tessa, Siren, Jubilee, Rachel Summers, Madeline Pryor, Maura McTaggart, Lilandra, Shadow King, Cannonball, Warpath, Mirage, Wolfsbane, Karma, Cypher, Sabretooth, Empath, Sebastian Shaw, Donald Price, Avalanche, Pyro, Legion, Nimrod, Gateway, Strong Guy. Wait, his name is just literally Strong Guy? Who the hell is Strong Guy? That's just literally his name. Okay. Proteus, Mr. Sinister, Marauders, Purifiers, Captain Britain, Sunspot, Forge, and Gambit. Oh boy, he created a lot of characters. So he basically so he based it's kind of like one of those situations similar to like Bob Kane and Bill Finger, where it's like technically Bob Kane created Batman, but Bill Finger is what made Batman. So it's like, yeah, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created the X-Men, but the X-Men we know today was pretty much created by Chris Claremont. Alright. Not saying that Lee and Kirby do not deserve their praises, I'm just saying. Alright. Claremont wrote many classic stories, including The Dark Phoenix Saga and Days of Future Past, on which he collaborated with John Byrne. He developed the character of Wolverine into a fan favorite. X-Men #1, the 1991 spin-off series premiere that Claremont co-wrote with Jim Lee, remains the best-selling comic book of all time, according to Guinness World Records. In 2015, Claremont and his X-Men collaborator, John Byrne, were entered into the Will Eisner Hall of Fame. Well, I sure hope so. Wait. I'm just noticing this. Spouses. Bonnie Wilford. What do you mean? What does this mean? What? Does it mean that nobody knows that they were officially married? Or nobody knows that he was officially his wife? What does that even mean? Okay, but his current wife is Beth Fleischer. Wow, the Fleischers are really getting it in with the comic book industry. 2 children. And his notable works were Uncanny X-Men, New Mutants, Captain Britain, Excalibur, Wolverine, Fantastic Four, Miss Marvel, Iron Mist, Extreme, and X-Men. And he has won the Comic Spire Guide Fan Awards from 83, 84, 88, 89, and 90, the Eagle Award, and the Will Eisner Award. Okay. Claremont was born in London, England. His father was an internist, and his mother was a pilot and caterer. Oh, interesting. Oh my god. Okay, please do not take this the wrong way, but it's like, wow, he was Jewish too? Alright, Claremont is Jewish on his mother's side and lived in a kibbutz in Israel during his youth. His family moved to the United States when he was 3 years old, and he was raised primarily on Long Island. Alienated by the sports-oriented suburbs, his grandmother purchased for him a subscription to Eagle when he was a child, and he grew up reading Dan Dare, finding them more exciting than the Batman and superhero comics of the 1950s and early 1960s. He read works by science fiction writers such as Robert Heinlein, as well as writers of other genres such as Rudyard Kipling and C.S. Forester. Or, Forester, yeah. Kipling, he was, okay. Sorry guys, but I keep forgetting if he was Tarzan or if he was, Heart of Darkness. Just a story. Okay, he wrote the Jungle Book. Okay. Just so stories. Okay. Let's see, as Fruster. Alright, naval warfare. Alright. Okay. Now we're getting into the comics. So Claremont initially did not view the comic book industry as the place where he would make his career, as he believed the dwindling readership to be a sign that the industry was dying. Yeah, the dwindling readership of 300,000 people buying your comic books. Sorry, it's a little hard to take it seriously when the old fogies were talking about, oh yeah, the readership was really dipping back then, when it's like, you were still selling 1 million comic books a day. Nowadays, one title can be lucky if they can sell 50,000 comic books. Alright. Anyway, he found the material being published to be uninteresting. Instead, when he began at Bard College, he did so as a political theorist studying acting and political theory, and writing novels with the hope of becoming a director. His first professional sale was a prose story. He graduated in 1972. Claremont's career began in 1969 as a college undergraduate when he was hired as a gopher editorial assistant at Marvel Comics. His first professional scripting assignment was Daredevil number 102. What the heck was that? Anyway, I find it interesting that that's how he got into Marvel Comics. He was just like a gopher. And for those who don't know what a gopher is, a gopher was basically an errand boy. I used to be, yeah, gopher, yeah, employee. Yeah, you're basically an errand boy. And I was a gopher for my dad for a little bit too. He's a lawyer, and I would just help him out with his, gathering information about certain properties and whatnot for his cases. But I find it so interesting that that was how he got into Marvel Comics. Then again, Ann Nocenti pretty much just walked into Marvel for an editorial job and walked out being a Daredevil writer, so what do I know? Anyway, as an entry into regular comics writing, Claremont was given the fledgling feature Iron Fist in Marvel Premiere as of. Not yet. As of issue number 23. He was joined 2 issues later by artist John Byrne. Oh, wow, right off the bat, okay. The Claremont-Byrne team continued to work together when the character received its own self-titled series in November 1975. This title lasted 15 issues. Well, that's not too bad. Alright, though his acting career did not yield great success. Acting career. Okay, hold on. When did it say he wanted to be an actor? Okay. We are done with Robert Kipling, okay? Rudyard Kipling. Blech. Where did it say he wanted to be an actor? I guess this is the first time we're hearing about this. Alright, though his acting career did not yield great success, he functioned well at Marvel, where he obtained a full-time position. One of the first new characters created by Claremont was Madrox the Multiple Man in Great-Sized Fantastic Four number 4. Marvel's editor-in-chief at the time, Len Wein, who recognized Claremont's enthusiasm for the new X-Men and that Wein and David Crockham had created the 1975, hired Claremont, a relatively young writer, to take over the series as of issue number 94, reasoning that doing so would not draw opposition from other writers given the book's poor standing. Claremont approached the job as a method actor, developing the characters by examining their motives, desires, and individual personalities. I mean, that's what you should be doing as a writer. What were the other guys doing beforehand? Like that's how you write. All right. This approach drew immediate positive reaction. According to former Marvel editor-in-chief Bob Harras, he lived it and breathed it. He would write whole paragraphs about what people were wearing. He really got into these people's thoughts, hopes, and dreams. Claremont's take on the series has been likened to writing the great American novel about complex characters who just happen to fly, incorporating surprising character developments and emotional nuances amid the operatic battles and otherwise typified American superhero comics. By his own admission, Claremont acquired a reputation for taking a long time to resolve plot threads, and longtime X-Men editor Louise Simonson recounted that whenever she was at a loss for story ideas, all I'd have to do was go through all the plot threads that he had left for the last year or two. Set up enough of ground so that other writers can continue. That's also very good. He went above and beyond for X-Men. That's actually quite nice. Alright. Claremont introduced new supporting characters to the X-Men series, including Moira McTaggart in issue number 96 and Leonardo Neramani in 97, Jean Grey, aka Marvel Girl, one of Marvel's first female superheroes, underwent a dramatic transformation into an extremely powerful Phoenix in issue 101. Issue 107 saw the introduction of the Starjammers as well as the departure of artist Dave Crockham. Claremont began his collaboration with artist John Byrne in the following issue. During his 17 years as X-Men writer, Claremont wrote or co-wrote many classic X-Men stories, such as the Dark Phoenix Saga and Days of Future Past. Comics writers and historian Roy Thomas and Peter Sanderson observed that the Dark Phoenix Saga is to Claremont and Byrne what the Galactus trilogy is to Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. It is a landmark in Marvel history, showcasing its creators' work at the height of their abilities. Comics historian Les Daniels noted that the controversial story created a sensation, and the X-Men became the comic book to watch. In 2010, Comics Bulletin ranked Claremont and Byrne's run on the X-Men second on its list of top 10 1970s Marvels. Claremont and artist Frank Miller crafted a Wolverine limited series in 1982. I've read that, and it actually is very good. It's kind of funny because he inserted every single Japanese stereotype in there, just in case you forgot that the story took place in Japan. But yeah, I do find it a very good and very charming series. Alright. With artist Walt Simonson, Claremont produced The Uncanny X-Men and The New Teen Titans in 1982, an intercompany crossover between the top-selling Marvel and DC titles. The New Mutants were introduced by Claremont and Bob McLeonard in Marvel graphic novel number 4, and received their own ongoing series soon after. The second X-Men film was loosely based on his 1982 X-Men graphic novel, God Loves, Man Kills. This is an excellent series, by the way. I read this one too, and the villain of that storyline is truly what I consider to be one of the most terrifying villains out there. It's because he's so charismatic and so convincing, and he's able to manipulate people into doing such horrifying things, and it's just so fascinating. Alright. Besides his work on X-Men and its spin-offs, Claremont wrote Marvel Team-Up, Spider-Woman, and Miss Marvel during this time. He and artist John Bolton created the Miranda the She-Wolf character in 1981. Claremont's stories for Marvel Team-Ups included the cast of NBC's Saturday Night Live appearance in issue number 74, and the introduction of Karma, a character that later joined the New Mutants in number 100. Claremont helped launch the Marvel Fanfare title in March of 1982. Man, he was a busy, busy boy at this time. Alright. Claremont co-created numerous other important female X-Men characters, including Rogue, Betsy Braddock, Mariko, we went through this already. He co-created such notable male characters such as Saber the Pirate. Okay, we already went through that already too. Alright. Claremont launched various X-Men spin-offs, beginning with the New Mutants in 1982, the spin-off Excalibur. I read a little bit of that. That was a very good series. And Wolverine, initially written by Claremont, followed in 1987 and 1988, respectively. X-Men crossover stories written by Claremont during this latter half of his tenure on the series included Mutant Massacre, Fall of the Mutants, and Extinction Agenda. In 1991, Marvel launched a second X-Men title simply called X-Men, with Claremont and penciler Jim Lee as co-writers. X-Men number 1 is still the best-selling comic book of all time, with sales of over 8.1 million copies, nearly $7 million. That is absolutely insane. According to the Guinness World Records, which presented honors to Claremont at the 2010 San Diego Comic-Con, the sales figures were generated in part by publishing the issue with 4 different variant covers, which showed different characters from the book, and later a 5th Greatfold cover that combined all 4. large numbers of which were purchased by retailers who anticipated fans and speculators who would buy multiple copies in order to acquire a complete collection of covers. Claremont left the series after the first 3-issue story arc due to clashes with editor Bob Harris. Tale as old as time. Creative clashes, people leave, blah blah blah. Alright. Okay, 1992 to present. In the 90s saw Claremont diversify his comics work, as he wrote for other publishers and wrote his own creator-owned properties. In December 1991, he sent artist Whilce Portasio a proposal to illustrate Claremont's project, The Huntsman, as a creator-owned project, and when the then-new comic publisher Image Comics was announced in 1992, Claremont was named one of its founders. However, the project was cancelled when Portasio decided instead to do Wetworks? What the heck is Wetworks? American comic book series. 4 years. Okay. Alright. Claremont attempted to find other artists for the series, but all those whom he was interested in were either drawing X-Men or had their own projects with Image, and thus he did not become one of Image's founders. Aww. Well, that's screwy. In 1992, he wrote the graphic novel Star Trek Depth of Honor, which was illustrated by Adam Hughes. Stan Lee interviewed Claremont for episode 7 of the 1991-1992 documentary series, The Comic Book Greats. Oh yeah, we've seen a few of those episodes on this show. Man, that series only lasted a year? Dang! Anyway, in 1993, he began writing the 12-issue miniseries Aliens, Predators, Deadliest of the Species for Dark Horse Comics, which was completed in 1995. That year saw a decline in his comics output. However, as he turned his focus to writing novels, citing frustration with how the comics industry had become dominated by artists and editors. In 1994, he wrote issues 10 through 13 of Jim Lee and Brandon Cho's series Wildcats at Image Comics, in which he finally introduced his creator-owned character, Huntsman. In 1995, Claremont began writing his creator-owned series Sovereign 7, which was published by DC Comics, running for 36 issues until 1998. In 1998, Claremont returned to Marvel as editor-director and the regular writer of Fantastic Four, where he created Valeria Richards. She's the daughter, yes? Yep, daughter. The book was penciled by artist Salvador Larroquia and inked by Art Thibault for the entirety of his duration on the series. Claremont's run on Fantastic Four would last for 29 issues and 2 annuals, making it his longest tenure on a title outside of X-Men. Despite outselling books such as Amazing Spider-Man and Batman, Claremont was fired by editor Bobby Chase in early 2000, a decision he was angered by. Wait, why would you fire him? What did he do? He was one of your best sellers. Why would you fire him? Who is this Bobby Chase? I saw a female editor. But fuck you, Bobby Chase. What the hell are you thinking? Claremont also wrote the Fantastic Fourth Voyage of Sinbad in 2001, a one-shot starring the Fantastic Four. That's a notification. An adventure with Sinbad the Sailor. The comic was penciled by Pascal Fury. In 2000, as part of the company's Revolution event, he wrote Uncanny X-Men and X-Men until he moved to Extreme X-Men against working with penciler Salvador Larroquia. He returned to Uncanny X-Men again for a 2-year run starting in 2004, while teaming up with his former Excalibur creator and artist Alan Davis. In 2004, Claremont was co-writer on JLA issues number 94 and 99, the 10th Circle story arc for DC Comics, which reunited him with his former Uncanny X-Men artist John Byrne, with Jerry Ordway as inker. In 2007, Claremont returned to New Excalibur, writing a story arc in which the character Nocturne has a stroke. He has completed his first arc on Exiles, adding Betsy Braddock to the team. 2008, Claremont wrote the miniseries Gen X, followed by its 2009 sequel, Gen X United. He was the writer of an X-Men Forever series, which was set in an alternate universe and focuses on the present-day lives of the X-Men in a reality where Magneto never returned following the destruction of Asteroid M in X-Men number 3. In 2010, Claremont collaborated with Italian comics artist Milo Manera on X-Woman. Okay. As of 2014, Claremont was under an exclusive contract for Marvel. I do not like the sound of that. In April of that year, Marvel launched a Nightcrawler series with Claremont as writer, which he finished in March of 2015. He reunited with his former New Mutants artist, Bill Sienkiewicz, for the one-shot New Mutants War Children in 2019. I do not like that exclusive contract thing. Exclusive contract means that he is likely stuck in a no contest order. Had a little drinky poo after that. Okay. According to writer-editor Paul Levitz, Claremont's complex story structure played a pivotal role in assembling the audience that enabled American comics to move to more mature and sophisticated storytelling and the graphic novel. Claremont's editor on the series, Louis Simonson, attributes the X-Men's success to his approach to the characters. Chris took them seriously. They were real people to him. I mean, you kind of have to treat your characters as real people in order to write them convincingly, because if you just think, oh, this is just a character, or oh, this is just a toy I can play with, then they're not going to be very convincing. Alright, as the writer of X-Men, Claremont became known for certain characteristic phrases, such as Wolverine saying, "I'm the best there is at what I do, and what I do isn't very nice," which came closely associated with the character. A 2009 Slate article called Claremont the soapiest writer in comic books. Okay. The classic Claremont pose is either a character, head hung in shame with two enormous rivers of tears running down the cheeks as he or she delivers a self-loathing monologue, or a character with head thrown back and mouth open in a shout of rage, shaking tiny fists at heaven and vowing that the whole world will soon learn about his or her feelings. However, the article goes to state that the genius of Chris Claremont was that he made mutants a generic stand-in for all minorities. Okay. "I am an immigrant," said Claremont in 2014, describing his affinity with outsiders. "After arriving in the United States from England, he was beaten up because I looked like a geek." His emphasis on the theme of prejudice resonated with readers as the X-Men series rose in popularity. Yeah, from what I understand, the whole, X-Men was always about racial prejudice, that wasn't really a thing in the OG X-Men. It wasn't until folks like Claremont went onto the series and started adding in this narrative that's when it became a allegory for racism. Alright. Novels and acting. I have been curious about that acting thing. Okay, in 1987, Claremont began writing genre novels. His first was a science fiction trilogy about female USAF pilot and astronaut Nicole Shea, consisting of First Flight in 1987, Grounded in 1991, and Sundowner in 1994. Claremont co-wrote the chronicles of the Shadow War trilogy, Shadow Moon, Shadow Dawn, and Shadow Star, with George Lucas, which continued the story of Elora Danan from the movie Willow. Claremont was a contributor to the Wild Cards anthology series. Claremont made a cameo appearance in the opening scene of 2006 film X-Men: The Last Stand, for which he is credited as Lawnmower Man. He made a cameo appearance as a congressional committee member alongside fellow comic book writer Len Wein in the early scene of the 2004 film X-Men: Days of Future Past. Oh, that's nice. It's kind of just like with Stan Lee, how he always tried to make a cameo, at least in some part of the movies. Alright, charity work. In December 2010, Claremont appeared at a book signing at Borders at Penn's Plaza in Manhattan as part of a series of events nationwide to commemorate World AIDS Day, with 25% of the proceeds of books sold at the event donated by Lifebeat, a non-profit organization that educates young people on HIV/AIDS prevention. Okay, sign a deed gift to Columbia. Donating as archives. Alright. Okay. In the mid-70s, Claremont was married to Bonnie Wilford. Following the dissolution of that marriage, he married Beth Fleischer. Wait, so they're not even going to explain why there was those weird question marks next to her name? Like, what was with the question marks? Why is there a with whom? Claremont co-authored Dragon Moon. Fleischer is the cousin through marriage of editor Dan Raspeller, who was the editor of JLA during the 6th-issue 10th Circle story arc. Claremont and John Byrne wrote in 2004. Claremont and Fleischer have twin sons. Okie dokie dokie. It looks like that's about it. I am so curious to know why he was fired from Fantastic Four. But anyway, we're going to get into some of the videos. This is a sci-fi video in which he's talking about favorite X-Men stories and everything you never knew behind the panel. Let's get into this.
The bomb, boss. The bomb. It will explode any second now. Right?
Yes, exactly. Ready? You're all warmed up? Awesome. You created such an important character in the X-Men mythos, Phoenix, and that was 6 issues into your run, I think. It was X-Men 100, end of X-Men 100. I mean, that was literally like a year into your run. Yeah. You created this character, and that was just one of like dozens of other characters that just came one after the other.
Mm-hmm. Well, just the idea of...
Why does he still have a British accent? It's so weird.
Taking someone like Nightcrawler.
Okay, it's not a British accent. I guess he does kind of have like a little bit of a British drawl. Never mind.
Who visually and how he was presented in Giant Size #1, he was fleeing a mob, he was a creature of demonic appearance and obviously being persecuted. And the thought occurred to me that, okay, I'm 18, I've been blue and furry since I've been born, I have a tail, 2 fingers, 2 toes, oh yes, and I can teleport. So, and everybody hates me because I look this way. So what happens? Well, either I blow my brains out because I'm so depressed and so...
Well, that's one way to put it.
full of self-loathing that I can't stand it, which makes for a very unappealing character, or I deal with it. How do you deal with it? Well, he's German. They're nice people. They have a sense of humor. They have a sense of humanity. And they are people of faith.
Oh! Hey, Genuine Comics. How are you doing today? I'm, sorry for hearing the squeaking in the background. That's my rocking chair. We're just now getting into the video interviews of Chris Claremont, so thank you for coming along.
So if I'm born and I look like a demon, I can either act like a demon, or why do I look this way? Well, God made me in his image. Cool. Okay, I'm good with that. So maybe Kurt reconciled how he is with his faith. If God made me, and God made me in this image, then God must have a plan. So who am I to argue? Let's go with it, and I will live my life according to the precepts in the Bible.
Well, that's definitely a far more positive outlook on that, on how he is the way he is, because Chris is a legend, he understands the character. Yeah, he does. And we were reading earlier that the way he approached his writing is he would just do, like, basically method acting of trying to, like, really get into how these people would react to the situations that they're in. And I feel like that's the best way to go about it, because that's kind of how I approach writing a little bit, because most of my characters, I daydream as them. Like, I daydream that I'm in their shoes, and it's like, okay, I'm in this position, and this is who I am, so how would I approach this? And it's not necessarily how, like, me, Heather Veely, would approach it, but it's like, me, Skylar, would approach this, or me, Julian, would approach this. And I feel like that's the most effective way to approach writing, because, again, if you only view the characters as, like, toys to play with, then there's that disconnect, and you can't really reach the character, and you can't really figure out who they are and be able to write them correctly. But, yeah, because, yeah, I think it was Claremont who introduced the fact that Nightcrawler was religious. Because if I remember correctly it was a different video, I believe it was the Lindsay Ellis video about Nightcrawler, where he wasn't originally super religious, and it wasn't until later that he became religious. But I like the way that, how do I do it with detestable villains? Honestly, this is gonna sound somewhat sociopathic, but it's honestly very easy to do it with detestable villains, because you have to look into the deepest and darkest points of yourself. That's how I would approach it. I'm one of those people where I'm of the opinion that humans are they're not good or bad at their very core, but they are selfish and self-preserving. And when you look at it that way, then it's very easy to figure out why evil people do the things that they do. It's because they are trying to accomplish their own goals the way they see fit. Laws be damned, morality be damned, and other people's feelings be damned. Say you're writing a villain who is a corrupt CEO. It's honestly very easy to figure out how his mind work, because he's just thinking, okay, how am I going to be able to get these good investments? How am I going to be able to make my own company work well? And he will figure out a way, okay, I gotta cut this, maybe murder a few people, and I just gotta focus on my goal of making sure my company is number one no matter what. Or say a cult leader. He's more of, how do I get all these people to get on my side? How do I get them to do what I want them to do? Just give them a few lies, spin them this tale of what's the afterlife like, and and make sure I'm very charismatic and make sure I win them over, and they will do anything I want them to do. And it's kind of scary a little bit, and I don't like imagining villains too often or too frequently because it's a downer. It does get me depressed whenever I get into that like the villain mindset, because I don't like being in the villain mindset for very long. But yeah, that's kind of how I approach detestable villains. But enough about me. Let's go back to Claremont.
And with that, we had him, because it made him the most normal, the most rational, and of course, being a young, impressionistic kid in a circus, who does he fall in love with? Errol Flynn, playing all the roles. He became a swashbuckler. And that's become, for me anyway, that's the element that has defined him from then till now. To me, the irony is Len's conception of the X-Men had Colossus as the core character. Why? He's got the primary colors in his costume. And when he turns into Colossus, he's this huge, magnificent,
Sure,
gleaming.
most powerful member. Yeah.
Oh, he's just beautiful. And actually, within the context of the time, having a young, impressionistic Russian as the core of your team was actually a very radical choice on Len's part.
Especially considering that this was 70s and 80s, well, and that was still around when the Cold War was still going on, so yeah, that would be kind of radical.
I figured, there are a lot of big, powerful male guys. Let's play with the other characters. Let's see who actually surfaces. And for me, obviously, I fell hard for Aurora, because, especially in Dave's design, she was strikingly...
Let's be real, who doesn't fall for Storm? Let's be real here. Even the straightest of women are like, oh yeah, Storm's a baddie. She is absolutely a baddie.
She was striking. And she was a total fish out of water, coming from...
Which is a big part of those first 10, 15 issues in particular, I remember.
Right.
The claustrophobia that she suffered from.
The fact that she's an African in New York, which even then was the most cosmopolitan city in the world. But they're all fish out of water in that sense. Colossus, when I was doing solo stories with John Bolton, I did one where he goes down to Brighton Beach and is hanging out in the Russian community there. And one thing leads to another, and he meets a girl, and they start a relationship, and then she discovers what he is as being a mutant. He saves her life in the process, but she's horrified and runs away. Aww. With Nightcrawler, I wanted to make him, or he evolved into, in Dave's and my vision, the soul of the X-Men. He's the one that everyone anchors to in terms of faith. He's the one who's always willing to reach out. For example, his best friend is Logan. He's the one who embraces Wolverine, because he's an outsider. He knows what that's like. You don't walk away.
And if the one who looks like a demon with blue fur and a tail can still have faith, then how can the others not? Yeah.
He's a charming, attractive gentleman. And that's how people relate to him, not by how he looks, per se, but how he acts. Which...
I don't know if many of you guys know about this trend, but there's this trend called Hear Me Out, or the Hear Me Out cake. And the whole concept of the Hear Me Out cake is you have like a cake, and then you take these popsicle sticks with a character on there that you are either attracted to, or someone or something that you are attracted to, that you have to defend why you are attracted to them. And the overall trend and the overall thing that people have noticed is when it comes to women the women who do the Hear Me Out, they are actually very weird with who their Hear Me Outs are. Like, their Hear Me Outs are, like, say, Bowser, or their Hear Me Outs are like the cricket from A Bug's Life. And it turns out it doesn't really matter too much about looks so long as you do have a good or charming personality. Or I guess charismatic personality, I should say, because you don't have to be good to be charismatic. But yeah. And with Nightcrawler, it's honestly not that I don't even really consider him a hear me out because he is so charismatic and he is so likable. So yeah.
Became in that short story me again trying to make the metaphor for the X-Men as a whole. It's not what they look like that we should be focusing on. It's how everyone behaves, what their actions define their character. Their character is ideally one we would like to know more about.
You and Jim Shooter and Louise Louise Simonson talking about the Dark Phoenix story, which, looking back now, you really see how incredibly groundbreaking that story was because you did something that hadn't been done before. You took a hero and made them as evil as they could be. Somebody who killed 6 billion living beings.
By accident.
But they still die.
To me, that made it even more horrific because all Phoenix thought about was, I'm hungry. Oh, there's a star.
Right.
Munchies. Not even thinking there's a planet that's inhabited, and by making the star go supernova.
That honestly makes her sound like she's on the same level of Galactus. Well, at least the Phoenix part. Because there's this whole debate of whether Galactus knows what he's doing is wrong, or whether Galactus is a person who's able to distinguish right and wrong, or if he's a force of nature. And it's honestly up in the air. It's honestly dependent on how you would view Galactus yourself based on his actions. But the way he's describing it, the Phoenix here, it sounds like the Phoenix is kind of on the same level of Galactus, where she's just a force of nature. She's not really a human capable of deciding between right and wrong. Yeah. Interesting. I don't know if I would classify that as evil too. If it's like you're just, this is a very interesting topic to go on. Like, if you're just doing what you were programmed to do, does that mean you're evil? I'm not saying like you consciously know what you're doing is bad and so you do it anyway. I mean, this is just how you're supposed to be. What's it good? Like for a lion hunts the antelope and kills it. Now we would see that as sad, and you can debate whether or not it's evil, but the thing is, the lion is just doing what a lion is programmed to do. So is that evil? But then when you get to characters like Galactus and the Phoenix, things get more complicated because they are conscious beings at the end of the day. And I don't know if that makes them even more evil or less evil. I don't know. You guys tell me in the comments.
She expunged that society because in that instant, they were ants. They were bugs on the ground, and she was just walking by. Because it was last minute, and because it was unplanned, and because it was so brutally sudden, the telling of the story paralleled the action of the story. It was immediate, it was virile, it was painful. Oh my God, how do we fix this? We can't fix this. We can only make a choice. She either goes to prison or she dies.
Wasn't it Claremont who originally just wanted her to go back to normal, and the editor's like, no, she has to face consequences?
And if we'd planned that 6 months earlier, to me, it wouldn't have had the emotional power, it wouldn't have the rawness that it did when it actually happened. And so, from the advantage of, God help us, 30 years on, looking back, oh God, is it 40 years on? Oh, sorry. I think this is one of those occasions where all the pieces came together in the right place at the right time for the right reasons to produce the right result. And I think it was a watershed moment, certainly in the lives of the X-Men. And speaking purely personally, I feel that retconning it 4 years later by resurrecting Jean, while an economically justifiable choice on Jim's part, as a storyteller, I would have been much happier if she'd stayed dead, because that would have been one of those benchmark moments where, because I played it for the next few years, as long as I could get away with it, the other X-Men suddenly realized we are mortal, that we are not protected by the fact that we're all copywritten and trademarked and need to be in movies and what have you.
Well, the specter of Jean Grey hung over that.
Well, I mean, that's comic books, baby. Like, you gotta sell, and if the there's the demand for a certain character to come back, you're gonna have to just suck it up. I mean, I'm not too happy with the fact that they're trying so hard to bring back Gwen Stacy. They have Gwenpool, who she's her own separate thing, yada yada yada. But then it's like, I think I've read somewhere that they actually legit want to bring back Gwen Stacy, and it's like, can Gwen Stacy just please stay dead? Like, I'm sorry, why does she need to come back? People have largely gotten over the death of Gwen Stacy. They haven't gotten over the whole Peter Parker Mary Jane thing, but people have gotten over, they've learned to accept that Gwen Stacy is gone. So it's like, can she just stay dead? It cheapens the death, it cheapens her death by bringing her back like that. That'd be like bringing back Uncle Ben. In my eyes, yeah.
Book for several years afterwards.
Well, we did covers like we did it to Jean. Dare we do it to Storm? Yeah, we could. Keep on your toes, kids.
You talk about how you weren't thrilled, as you pointed out, about the resurrection of Jean Grey. It started in Fantastic Four with John Byrne, your partner on X-Men for a number of years, was writing and penciling. Did you talk with him about that? Like, did you call him and say, John, why are you bringing her back?
No. By the time we found out it was done, I went home that weekend, got really pissed off, and came in Monday morning with a completely different scenario. I went into Jim's office, I said, okay, John wants to bring back Jean. I think that's a fundamental mistake. I have a way to do it better. So I said, because there's something that is fundamental here. If you bring back Jean, you're resurrecting the relationship with Scott and Jean, but Scott's married. We just did a year ago his wedding. It was a big deal. Oh, and he has a child.
Kind of a big deal.
So you're talking about...
Yeah, that definitely would complicate things.
About taking a character and having him walk out on his wife and newborn son to go back to his old girlfriend. What kind of hero would do that?
I wanted to ask you about the artist.
A Marvel hero. Let's be real. Scott and Jean's relationship is a mess. It has been a mess for a very, very long time. And they're not the worst when it comes to relationships. Like, Daredevil has one of the most tragic track records when it comes to relationships. But yeah, it's already, I do see his point here. Even though a lot of people do love Scott and Jean together, I do see his point here where it's like, okay, Jean's dead now. If we bring her back, we're kind of screwing up Scott's life a little bit here, having him choose between his current wife and the love that he lost. And we would make him look very, very, very unheroic if we had him leave his wife and kid. I mean, he would eventually look very, very, very unheroic later on when he kind of sort of has an affair with Emma Frost. But we're not getting into that now because that's Grant Morrison territory.
Artists that you worked with on the series over the years. I mean, Dave Cockrum, John Byrne, Dave Cockrum again, Paul Smith, John Romita Jr., Jim Lee. I mean, you Mark Silvestri. I mean, an incredible list of talent. How was the working relationship with each? Because obviously Marvel worked differently than DC because of the Marvel method. But I also know that you were much more detailed with your writing than, say, some other writers because you were so invested in it and you were with the X-Men for almost 20 years straight. How did your relationship differ from working with John in that great stretch to then transitioning to working with Dave again?
Well, I think the fundamental difference is that John had very specific and very defined and very passionate views, same as I did. And part of every issue was more or less, in certain respects, a compromise. Which direction do we go? Which character gets emphasized? How do we play this? In some elements, Dave and I were more simpatico, which is what worked the best in the beginning in terms of creating everybody. I think that each iteration is a period of adjustment. But in terms of storytelling, the best paradigm is when Frank Miller and I did the Wolverine miniseries. I mean, we started, basically trapped him in a car on I-5 driving from San Diego to Los Angeles for a party. And I'm pitching him Wolverine. And
so basically they came up with the story on a road trip? That's funny. Oh, stop it.
He was interested. So the plot I wrote for issue 1 was 20 pages of description for a 20-page story. And
by the way, this is one of my favorite pieces of art by Frank Miller here. This panel of him breaking out of the window and attacking these ninjas. This is probably one of my favorite Frank Miller pieces of all time.
You know, Frank did a brilliant job. For issue 4, basically I called him. We spoke on the phone for 20 minutes. I took notes. I wrote them up. 2/3 of a page. A month later, I got 22 pages of art back. The point was, the first issue was so intense because I was covering every base I knew, describing character, describing motivation, describing setting, describing event, why things are happening, how it relates A to B to C to D. By the 4th issue, Frank knew all that stuff. I knew Frank knew all that stuff. I knew how he drew, he knew how I wrote. None of the extraneous material needed to be told, so we could just cut down to the nitty-gritty. That's the ideal way to do it with every writer. I'm writing descriptions, I'm writing elements of how things should look as well as what there is happening. But 9 times out of 10 with the right artist, and for whatever miraculous reason, I have been gifted with the chance to work with so many of the right artists. They can do all that without being told. They know who the characters are, they know how to present concepts, how to present different looks, and how to get inside everyone's character. I can describe a scene to Alan Davis till my heart breaks, but the fact is he'll draw it brilliantly his own way, and it will probably look way better than what I envisioned.
That is something that I've had to come to terms with writing comic books myself. I will have my own image of how a scene is going to work. I will describe it to the best of my abilities, send it off, and I just have to hope that the artist is on the same page as me. Now, usually Martin is very good at understanding what I'm trying to go for here, but there are some times where there's a couple wires get crossed and we have to work it out a little bit there. But then there are other times where he produces stuff beyond my expectation and makes it seem better from his own artistic point. And I just have to accept the fact that, okay, I can have my own image and I can describe it to him as much as I want, but creating comic books, it's a collaboration. It's kind of the best way I've heard about creating comic books, it's like a jazz performance where you got one guy on the saxophone, one guy on the piano, and you just have to be in sync as much as you can. You're contributing different parts of the song, and you just have to be in sync as much as you can, even though you have different contributions to the song. And that's just something that, for me, I am a control freak when it comes to my writing, and that's the reason why I like being independent, is because I don't want a publisher telling me what I need to do. So for me, as a control freak, that's been the biggest hurdle for me to overcome when writing comic books, just understanding I am collaborating with another person, and they are going to be adding their own touches to a scene to make it the best it can be.
So it's finding that balance between the conceptual presenter and the actualization.
Moving ahead to like the late 90s, when the X-Men book is selling a gazillion copies, then you launch X-Men with Jim Lee. You're working with Jim, and the book is as big as it can get. Mm-hmm. No comic book had ever been more popular than that one at the time, at least if you want to judge by sales alone, mm-hmm. right? But you're not thrilled with the direction of the company then at the time, and you leave the book, I think, issue 3? No.
Yeah, well, the problem was no one in comics at that point had ever dealt with somebody who'd stuck around as long as I had. I mean, at this point, I was 17 years in, and I was thinking, maybe I'll think about it at 20, 25 would be good. Or if I still have ideas, maybe I'll go to 30. From my conception as a writer, I have stories to tell. These characters are too cool. I've barely scratched the surface. From a publishing standpoint, I was getting to be a real problem, only that a publisher wants to be able to offer their prime product as an enticement. Hey there, Alan Moore, you want to write the X-Men? No, I'm writing brilliant stuff of my own.
Well, I think by the 90s, Alan Moore was pretty much done with both of the big publishing houses anyways. So, yeah. Well, and that's another, I guess I never thought about that, like, you have someone on for so long, then it's like, well, how do we attract more talent? So I guess I can see the logistical side of it, but it is very scummy still.
Come on, you really want to write? No! I'm fantasizing because I'm not sure Alan would even take that call. On the other hand,
He wouldn't. He absolutely wouldn't.
Pages he wrote of X-Men for the Heroes for Hope anthology were so damn good, I hated him right at the moment. It was like, ugh! You know.
The only 3 pages of X-Men he's ever written.
Thank God. But they were all Magneto. But the point was that how can they offer the book to Joss Whedon if I'm writing it? How can they offer the book to anybody if I'm writing it? So there was...
You were a victim of your own success in a way.
From Marvel's perspective, yes. And of course, my social skills were such, I had no idea. The most clueless a-hole imaginable.
Well, that's one way to describe yourself, but I guess, well, couldn't they figure out something? Because I know that sometimes they have like a fill-in writer or they have like a guest writer, so I guess maybe, why didn't they just work out a deal with him where it's like, hey, we really want to try out a different writer. Can you work on another book for this month while we get another guy for this? Like, why couldn't they figure out a deal like that? I mean, I don't know. It's just, I feel like it would be really dumb to throw away one of your best and well-known writers just because you were itching to get new talent in and you just didn't know what the hell to do. Like, I feel like you could have worked that out a little bit better, Marvel. Why am I talking like Marvel is just one person?
Last thing I want to ask you about, pick 3 Chris Claremont X-Men books that should be put in a time capsule for future generations to read.
I can give you 3 arcs.
Sure.
Dark Phoenix, for one. Life, Death. Only 3?
If you give me 4, I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, but see, this is the problem. You could name anyone and I'll go, works for me. Because I've known them all for too long.
They're all my babies. You can't make me choose a favorite with my babies.
Known these stories for too long. The X-Men, to me, my core run on Uncanny from the beginning to the end is one story. It's consistent, it's everybody, it's the growth and evolution of all the characters and their lives. Yes, the story branches out to Wolverine, the Wolverine series and the Excalibur series and the other peripheral series, but they're all the same people, they're all the same lives, it's all the same beginning, middle, and as far as my relationship, end. So it's one story. And I'm good with that.
I'm going to allow you the cheat of 94 through 279, but I'm going to stick to the Life, Death, Death of Phoenix, Death of Grace. Those are great choices.
Thank you.
Chris, thank you so much for talking with us.
Pleasure is mine.
Right. Alright, we're done with that. I gotta get through that, so let's see. So we got Chris Claremont, Oblivion. But then there's Chris Claremont's final interview before quitting X-Men after 17 years from cartoonist Kayfabe. Let's see about this one. I'm thinking about ending the stream at 8 just because I have an article I'm working on, so I'd like to get that done before I have to go to bed. So let's look at this one.
You see a picture of Chris Claremont, famous X-Men writer. For all of my childhood, virtually all of my time reading X-Men.
Hot off the heels of the wild success of X-Men #1, 8.5 million copies of that baby sold. And if you saw the Stan Lee videos from the 90s, that the straight to video interview series that he did, Chris Claremont was on there, and right around this time. And Stan Lee asks, well, what did you do with all those royalties? And he mentions the airplane that he bought. It's called a Cessna Bonanza. And I'm a schnurrer, right? So I looked that up.
What? He bought what? Plane? Why would he buy a plane? What are you going to use it for?
Up online. $300,000 aircraft.
And he bought that for his mother?
For his mother. Yeah.
Yeah, so here we are, Chris Claremont interview. Talking about X-Men, of course. This is, his main title. I think this is what everybody knows Chris Claremont from, what they think of when they think of Chris Claremont. And this is basically just part of that Marvel press push of promoting more X-books, relaunched X-books, and obviously building on the momentum of having an 8 million copy selling X-Men book. So kind of straightforward. He gives a little bit of background on what he has planned, what the editors had in mind.
Yeah, we should talk about that. So the editor-in-chief was Tom DeFalco at the time. And this kind of illustrates the difference between the corporate people and the creatives. Like, why... Now, I know DeFalco wrote Thor and has written comics and all this, but his idea for what a second X-Men book would be was simply just more of the same. That's all he wanted it to be. Just instead of instead of Uncanny X-Men being a bi-weekly book the way it was before, for a certain stretch of time, why not just have 2 titles focusing on the same basically 5 characters? And at this point, Claremont established and created dozens and dozens of characters that he frankly loves. When he talks about his characters, he doesn't think of them as characters. He calls them by name.
Yeah, that's the vibe I was definitely getting from that previous interview. Like, he genuinely did love the characters he was creating, and when you approach, because he didn't view them as toys, he didn't view them as tools. However, when you're working for a corporation who's all about the profit margin, they only see them as fictional characters and tools. And so I could definitely see Claremont getting very, very, very upset by that.
And he says things like, Kitty wouldn't like that. He's really invested in the material that he created. And, thankfully, like, his idea sort of won out, at least at the beginning.
Yeah, and it's worth noting at the same time of this X-Men launch, Superman was publishing, I think, 4 titles, and they really were treated almost like a weekly. They were coordinated in a very detailed manner, where the writers and editors would plot out sometimes a year or more of story, and then each book was responsible for X amount of that story.
Right. Yeah. So
who is voicing? Who is here? Complete episode. Okay. Oh, this is one of so Ed. I wonder if that's a. Okay, yeah, I wonder if that's if those are Ed's. I don't think those are Ed Piscor's hands. Maybe it's he's the one who's talking off camera. But yeah, very sad what happened to Ed Piscor.
So I'm sure Tom DeFalco is looking around at the competition, and it's like that seems like a viable method to create multiple books within the same family.
Yeah, I guess so. It's just a very corporate stance to take when it's like, okay, we have this successful thing, so let's just do more of the same, rather than trying to strike twice or something. Now, last issue, when we were going through that,
which from a corporate perspective I can understand where they're coming from, but at the same time you can't just stick with the corporate path all the time. You know what I mean? Because if you just stick with the economics and you just stick with the corporate path, you close yourself off from new opportunities and new things that are happening. Because let's put it this way, if they just kept with the corporate path all the time, then something like, say, The Killing Joke would never have been made. You know what I mean?
That Todd McFarlane interview, you made note about like early Photoshop, desktop publishing, but this is clearly pasted up. Like, it looks like it could have been like a serial killer's scrapbook. Like
it does. I was looking at that and I was wondering, okay, why did they choose this picture of him? Like, he looks like he's in the middle of speaking, or he looks like he's about to spit. It's like, that's the most flattering picture you could get of Chris Claremont. Like, seriously, that's the most flattering one you can get.
Like, this is cut out, like, not even with an X-Acto blade, but with scissors. I really hope it gets captured well on film, man. But there's nothing digital about the paste ups on at least the graphic.
Yeah, that's a good call. That's a pretty basic.
And there's a couple more. You could even see the shadow.
Yeah, you can see his face clearly cut out and pasted on there. Is pretty funny. One thing I would note on this first page is he references television shows. And the shows he lists are Hill Street Blues, L.A. Law, and Northern Exposure.
Right, because it's a big ensemble cast where all the characters kind of need to get a little bit of stage time. So
I mean, when it comes to an ensemble comic, that is how you should approach it, but okay.
Yeah, and here we go. I've known them all too long. I couldn't play favorites anymore. Claremont describing his relationship with these characters that you had mentioned a moment ago. And it makes sense. 15 or 16 years writing these characters, many of whom he created, he certainly developed as characters. You know, from my own limited experience making comics, I understand exactly what he means. You do kind of quickly start to think about these characters interacting with the world the way you would imagine a real living person. So it makes sense to me that he takes that approach.
in the body of this interview, when he's describing what Tom DeFalco had, everything that we just said before, one of the reasons why he wanted to cover all of the characters was because he knew he was going to be working with different artists. The artists at this point would have been Whilce Portacio on Uncanny X-Men and Jim Lee on the Adjectiveless X-Men. And he just talks about that different artists have different strengths, and then he talks about like how throughout his entire career this has been standard operating procedure. Dave Cockrum leaned.
Yeah, I guess that is something to keep in mind when writing, because some writers are good at, or some artists are better at making certain scenes than others, so it's like sometimes you do have to keep that in mind for writing. There's this fantastic documentary about Warren Ellis, and he mentions some point in the documentary that he will sometimes just talk to the artists and be like what do you want to draw, or what's your strengths and weaknesses, and he will frame the story that they're about to make around that. And the funny segment is for, I think it was like Hotwire or something, or Livewire, where he asked the artist, hey, what do you like to write? What do you like to draw? He's like, girls, motorcycles, girls, monsters, girls, leather. Did he mention girls? And he just crafted the plot around that. So I guess it makes sense that he's like thinking in the long run, like, okay, who are these characters, plotting them out, and then just prepping yourself for whichever artist comes your way so you can help design the story around their strengths and weaknesses. Because some artists are... This isn't a bad thing, by the way. This isn't me saying, oh, some artists are shit and some artists are just better than everyone else. But it's just like some artists are better at, say, dramatic scenes. Some artists are better at action scenes. Some artists are better at scenic scenes and something like that. And it's good to keep that in mind when working in comic books. So I think it's very smart of Claremont to just think ahead and just have these characters like locked in, so if you get like a guest artist or you're working with a new artist, then you can work with them a little bit easier because you know these characters so well, and you can work with the artist to plot the story a little bit better, because the artist is the storyteller too, but they tell the story visually, and you as the writer have to tell it orally and textually.
Heavy toward Nightcrawler, and then when John Byrne pops on the book, he doesn't want to draw Nightcrawler, he wants to draw Wolverine, and those are just like, that's sort of the basic stuff.
Oh, that's what he meant. Okay. This is why, okay, if you're wondering why I've been taking longer to pause for these things, it's because either as soon as I unpause it, they're going to say the exact same thing that I had been saying, or they're going to go in a completely different direction that I was not anticipating. So, okay.
But the more you get into a collaborative process and you learn that, like, perhaps this artist doesn't like to draw cars so much, or that artist doesn't like to draw...
Oh, damn it. That's exactly what I was just saying. Ah! I've not pre-watched, I swear.
Heck, the popular example that Chris Claremont is not ashamed of giving is well, he doesn't call the person out by name, but he said in an old issue when Power Pack shows up, it looked like a bunch of, shall we say, little people.
That's probably what we should say.
Yeah, running around in the issue, and he talked with the artist and said, "Listen, if you weren't comfortable drawing kids, we could have called an audible. We could have done something else."
Yeah, it's a good point. I've seen him emphasize that in other interviews too, the dynamic that each artist brings to the collaboration, and a lot of these artists do end up as co-plotter, getting credit as co-plotters. So it is significant, and probably explains part of how he's able to maintain a career that long on one book, that ability to mesh with different artists. So this is the cover.
I've only worked with one artist, so I only really know how to work with Martin. That's just about it.
Wraparound cover of Uncanny X-Men 281.
Yeah, just want to show off. There's a color version of that from the actual issue, and there's it's drawn by Will Spartaccio, and there he is using those. There's Iceman using his powers in the way that you like.
Straight Iceman. That's what straight Iceman does.
Yeah, I do like that. This always struck me as an odd composition, with Jean Grey and Storm kind of overlapped, but butting up against each other. Like it's not a very dynamic overlap. It's kind of strange. It's almost a 3D image, where the images are just next to each other. That image always stood out to me as being just a little bit strange. Like they're fighting for who gets to be the leader, maybe.
On this page, we have Claremont just continuing to talk about all of his hopes and dreams and plans with where he's going to be taking X-Men and some of the things that he...
Well, that's sad, knowing what happens immediately after this interview.
He wants to explore with the series, and then the main interview closes out right here, and then we have this little epilogue.
Yeah, interesting epilogue indeed. This is as this issue was going to press, apparently, due to editorial differences, Chris Claremont leaves the X books. And it's like this whole interview is set up to launch this new direction and these two new X titles that Chris Claremont's kind of the architect behind. And interview concludes, I guess a day or two later, they receive word that Chris Claremont is leaving the X books. This epilogue just mentions that's what happened. They invited him to do an addendum to the interview, which he declined. I'm sure this was a very emotional experience for him.
Yeah, the fact that they still published it with the tacked on epilogue, and the fact that Claremont did not want to amend it, it does come across that he was extremely heartbroken by all of this.
Probably best that he did not engage in an interview at this time, maybe.
Yeah, after
Oh my god, can you imagine the tea that would have been spilt if they brought him back to do another interview? Can you imagine just while he was still in that emotional state, the shit he would reveal about Marvel back in that day? I feel like it would be on par with some of the internet arguments that go on nowadays in the indie sphere.
16 years of tenure.
But it is a wild thing to be reading, because there are all these plans, and then it's just like, oh, I guess that's not going to happen.
Right. He is, let's just say he's the first guy to leave a major selling book this issue, because I believe it's going to come up again later, and we'll talk about that later.
Whenever he left the comics, I quit reading X-Men probably 2 or 3 issues later. I didn't stick through all of Jim Lee's run. I associated Chris Claremont so closely with X-Men that whenever anybody, it wouldn't matter who took over writing, it was going to be different. He had that very soap opera, melodramatic tone, and when that left, it just felt dramatically different.
Yeah, the change in quality was pretty much instantaneous, and many of us, we kept just through inertia of month in, month out, sometimes week in, week out, buying the new X-Men comics. We sort of kept it up for a little bit there, but that would That would be what I would call the methadone stage, where you're just slowly weaning off until you can, cold turkey be done with it.
Two seconds. I got it. I have it right here. So, as I'm a writer, as you know, and I do go around to different comic book events. Trust me, I'm going somewhere with here. And one of the first comic book event, or not comic book fair events, I should say. And one of the first book fair events I went to, I met a man by the name of... Oh, come on. That's good. Alright. S. Plunkett. Alright, Sandy Plunkett. Yep, that's him. Yeah, and I met him in one of the events, and he was selling his The World of a Wayward Comic Book Artist. It's basically an art book and collection of all of his stuff that he worked on. Oh, hey, Scarlet Witch. Oh, sweet. But anyways, and at that book fair, I asked him, so, like, what's your opinion of the comic book industry, and where do you think it went wrong, or why did you leave the comic book industry? Because obviously he wasn't in it now. And he mentioned that in the 90s, the comic book industry was starting to get a lot more corporate, and they were, like, finding reasons left and right to get rid of people, or to like, tighten the belt, and blah, 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 blah. And so that's why he was gone. And I wonder if that's part of the reason why they were getting so crappy towards Chris Claremont when it came to his works. Because it's like, again, why would you intentionally antagonize and push out one of your, like, top faves with your fans? Like, why would you want to push out a writer that your fans absolutely love? And the answer could very easily be just they wanted to do their corporate thing. Like, corpos being corpos. The answer is as easy as that, if that is the answer. And it's a very sad answer, but like, what are you gonna do? And how about we look up for our last little video? Let's see if there's a... Okay, no, we're not doing that. Kind of geek. Okay, let's go with this guy. Uncanny X-Men by Chris Claremont, Evolution of an Icon.
The X-Men have evolved, taking on a new life and a newer, bolder team after years out of the spotlight. But what comes after the first great leap for a species? What happens to this team when they're brought face to face with a world that hates and fears them? And how will these struggles continue to shape the evolution of Marvel's mutants? Spanning over 17 years and 186 issues, Chris Claremont's tenure on the Uncanny X-Men is far more than impactful. It's a saga that reshaped a forgotten title into one of Marvel Comics' most popular and socially resonant stories to date. Following a band of outcasts gathered from across the globe, Claremont's run sees this group reforged through both tragedy and triumph, with their new bond elevating them into a powerful force for good. Breaking into comics in 1969,
And also making X-Men kind of sort of family. You know, family!
through minor work on Daredevil, Fantastic Four, and Marvel Premiere, Claremont's work on X-Men is seen as the ultimate capstone of his superheroes as social commentary approach to comics, using his background in political theory to give an even greater focus to the social subtext of the mutant metaphor at the title's heart. And while each arc of this titanic run tells its own story, Claremont's X-Men also weaves itself into one ongoing saga, with themes and arcs building on each other across the years. The writer's first major act in this series, spanning issues 94 through 131 of Uncanny X-Men, follows the new team as they're thrown into increasingly grand adventures, setting their growing pains against their evolution as individuals, as a family, and as the newest heroes for mutant kind.
Yeah, it's like the Claremont team is the one team that I am more familiar with. Even though I wasn't even born by the time Chris Claremont was in the X-Men, but when it comes to the X-Men, the Claremont version is the one I'm more familiar with.
1975 was a pivotal year for the X-Men. The success of Len Wein and Dave Cockrum's giant-size X-Men had brought the title back after years of dormancy, all built around a more colorful cast of heroes. And funnily enough, this bold new dawn for the X-Men nearly ended right after it began. While there was clear demand for more stories, Wein's promotion to editor-in-chief at Marvel left him unable to continue on the X-Men beyond a few issues. Enter Chris Claremont, who served at Marvel as an intern, occasional fill-in writer, and assistant to Wein. Having been a fan of the title since Neil Adams and Roy Thomas's time, Claremont's enthusiasm made an impact on the editor, who let him contribute to the plot of Giant Size and brought him on immediately after the issue's publication.
I was working as Len Wein's assistant editor, sitting just outside proofreading as Len and Dave Cockrum were evolving the new X-Men concept. I'd wander in and say, "Can I listen?" And they'd say, "Sure,"
the author states.
Issues 94 and 95 were what had been intended to be Giant Size X-Men number 2. It was pretty much Len's plot. David penciled about a third of it, then Len had to resign as editor pretty much. As I had worked on New X-Men and he respected my writing, he offered me the title. Our attitude was, if we've only got a year or two, let's have fun. Let's throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Claremont would co-plot and script issues 94 and 95 with Wein before taking over in September of 1975, with Dave Cockrum staying on as artist. And while this new story starts as a kind of coda to Giant Size, picking up after the rescue of Professor X's first class, Claremont quickly blows up the status quo and sets the stage for something new. These two issues see the new team pursue.
I've noticed that as somewhat of a trend with a lot of writers. It's like, especially when it comes to a series that's about to be canceled anyway, like Swamp Thing or Doom Patrol. When the new writer is brought on, it's like the first thing they want to do is just blow up the standard immediately. Like, you know what? This wasn't working in the first place, so you know what? Kaboom! All gone. My series now. I am going to make this the best comic I ever can, or I'm going to die trying.
pursuing Count Nefaria and his Animen in a clear throwback to Thomas and Adam's Silver Age adventures, but this tone is quickly undercut through the sudden and violent death of Thunderbird, bringing a new sense of vulnerability to the team who each work to find themselves in the wake of the tragedy. Of course, the death of a main character in comics wasn't exactly new by then, with Gwen Stacy's death in Spider-Man happening nearly 2 years earlier. But what separated Claremont's X-Men from its peers was the writer's ability to launch a greater journey in its aftermath. Coming from a background in political theory and theater, Claremont approached these new X-Men in the vein of a method actor, using this initial shock to deepen relationships and better define each character's personality. Cyclops' background as an orphan and perpetual survivor becomes a major element throughout Claremont's series, giving his stern broodiness a real sense of weight. Nightcrawler's demonic appearance is offset against his playful personality, a reversal of the more tortured figure Ween was going for. Both Storm and Colossus use outward strength to hide deeper loss and vulnerability, with Colossus haunted by the death of his older brother and Storm grieving the loss of her entire family. Banshee, an older mutant, is coping with his age and the loss of his powers. And in the absence of Thunderbird, Wolverine steps into the role of angry loner,
Okay.
bristling against his more open teammates. Of course, while Claremont's characterizations do a lot to enhance the limited impressions given by Ween, there are still a few less than perfect additions.
Alright, before we get into that, I guess we'll address what he has been speaking about so far. Yeah, like, it's like, we have all these characters, why not dive a little deeper in them? Why not dig a little deeper into why they are the way they are? And what is the core of how they approach things?
Colossus's secret cosmonaut brother and Banshee's offensively Irish castle dip
Offensively? Looks like a regular-ass castle. What the hell are you talking about?
back into the stereotyping of before and kinda even go beyond.
Are you serious? Please tell me he's not gonna go on a 5-minute rant about the stereotypes.
I mean, come on, it's literally staffed by leprechauns. Who cleared that? Luckily,
Oh, shut up!
moments like these are few and far between, outweighed by a metric ton of moments that make these characters feel as real as possible.
What made X-Men so fun was getting into the heads of the characters, of showing what it would be like as a person to present to the readership, what it's like to be a person of colour with powers, a person of a different religion trying to deal with life in an America that is choosing up sides, of men and women dealing with social and personal inequalities,
Reflects Claremont.
To just reduce the world to one skin-tight costume fights another skin-tight costume, great. But what will you take away from it? What will you remember a week from now or a year from now? The real life of a fictional character needs to have an impact on the real lives of the readers. That makes the fantasy much more interesting and the characters that much more resonant.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, maybe it's because I'm a writer too, but it's like, of course. Yeah, it's so fucking obvious. I'm not saying I'm like Chris Claremont at all, but I'm just looking at this as like, yeah. Yeah.
Unlike the well-adjusted team at the end of Giant Size, Claremont's cast feels rougher than ever, with the writer using each character's motivations to bring them into open conflict with one another, sometimes at the expense of their grander goals. Funnily enough, this fallibility becomes a mainstay throughout the book, bringing this cast even closer to the model that made Marvel's classic characters so popular. These aren't the paragons of Lee and Kirby's time, nor the exaggerated icons of Ween and Cockrum's. Claremont's X-Men, befitting their central metaphor, feel a lot like regular people, making mistakes and constantly trying to overcome their faults. These arcs end up shifting between focal points over the course of the run, largely due to the change between Claremont's longtime collaborators. Cockrum, who largely favored Nightcrawler, would leave by issue number 108, where he was replaced with another long-running Claremont collaborator, John Byrne. It's unfortunate given his own lengthy history of bigotry, but Byrne's art has largely become synonymous.
Wait, what? Oh. Okay, maybe we should do like a stream about John Byrne because I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. I thought John Byrne illustrated a bunch of different characters and didn't really care about that, but alright.
With this era of X-Men. There's a lot of homage to Cockrum's work, with Glynis Weein's colors and Terry Austin's inks keeping everything consistent, but Byrne's emphasis on slightly more stylized features like bigger eyes, more pronounced physiques, and exaggerated poses really complement Claremont's larger-than-life style. Definitely the kind of look you'd want for a story built on melodrama. A major fan of fellow Canadian Wolverine, Byrne also became an instrumental part of the character's breakout status, backpedaling on Cockrum's jokier treatment of the character and shaping him into a more layered co-lead alongside Cyclops. You heard it here first, folks. Think Wolverine's oversaturated? Blame John Byrne.
Okay, I have noticed there's been a lot of John Byrne hate lately. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I have noticed that there's been a lot of John Byrne hate recently.
Interestingly, while these shifts in perspective could feel disorienting in other titles, Claremont's dialogue and character work manages to weave everything together in a natural way, giving every character equal importance in the book. Another of Claremont's innovations on X-Men was his dedication to building well-defined female characters, balancing power and vulnerability in a way that feels natural rather than patronizing. Storm's image as a powerful goddess is subverted, and then in Ernie, this evolution will become the basis of Claremont's story.
Okay. What the shit?
Stories moving forward, testing the new group's fragile bonds and elevating these eclectic loners into something stronger than ever before. Much like its predecessors in the 60s, Claremont's X-Men is built around the theme of evolution, both literal and metaphorical, taking good yet fallible people and elevating them into the heroic icons of a possible future. But how do these stories evolve to fit a grander scale and cast? And how does it all tie into the title's larger history? Interestingly, Claremont's stories seem just as focused on the evolution of the X-Men title as it is on the X-Men themselves, repurposing a number of mainstays from the book's history and giving them new levels of meaning through the newfound focus on the mutant metaphor. It's no surprise that one of Claremont's earliest stories reintroduces the mutant-hunting Sentinels, now under the control of Dr. Stephen Lang and the government-funded Project Armageddon, making mutant-kind's enemies a part of the establishment instead of lone fanatics. The connections to the title's past only grow from here, with Silver Age enemies coming out of the woodwork to break this new team down. Classic villain Juggernaut teams up with newcomer Black Tom, Cyclops' old alter ego Eric the Red is co-opted by a new supervillain, and Magneto returns after a lengthy absence at his most powerful.
Interesting. That's very interesting. I mean, I don't know, it's just Magneto is so intertwined with the X-Men that I just can't imagine the X-Men without Magneto, so okay, he's gone a while and now he's back. Okie dokie.
Remember when he got turned into a baby? Turns out he's pretty mad about that.
I mean, I would be too. Okay.
There's a deliberate effort to tap into the title's larger history, and as such, it can feel like Claremont's early run acts as an extension of Giant Size, constantly checking to see if this new team measures up to their predecessors. I mean, issue number 100 literally pits this new team against robot versions of the classics. I know writers who use subtext.
That looks like it would be fun to read.
And they're all cowards. But what's especially interesting is how Claremont's team is more reactive from story to story, with beats kicking off more intimate arcs between individuals and groupings. The group's stranding in the Savage Land leads to Jean and the Professor thinking them dead, and both sides grapple with grief and isolation until they're reunited in issue 120.
Oh, look at that. They're so happy together.
Colossus continues to struggle with homesickness as he's split between his real family in Russia and the family he's found with his fellow X-Men. Banshee's injury kicks off a larger arc of him struggling with his own limitations. Claremont even uses these smaller stories to tap into larger social issues, having Storm return to her childhood home in Harlem only to see it ruined by systemic neglect. Multiple characters are put on the back foot and are forced to think about their part in the group, whether or not they can defend their teammates in matters of life and death. And these newly deepened relationships only further complicate the team, with Wolverine's growing attraction to Jean Grey amping up his hostile rivalry with Cyclops. Claremont even infuses this sense of drama into the book's narration, elevating moments of drama, comedy, and tragedy through a more personal voice. We've all heard of show, don't tell, but if you ask me, this is how you show and tell. These more intimate plots are offset by occasional jaunts into the grander Marvel universe, as Claremont and his collaborators throw all sorts of crazy stuff into the mix, with Cockrum spinning his unused Legion of Superheroes ideas into the Shi'ar and Starjammers, and Byrne introducing a war in the Savage Land. A lot of times, Claremont has the X-Men stumble into vast, multi-sided conflicts, further building on the operatic scale of Giant Size. And cleverly, while these adventures can end up larger than life, they're always tied to a hidden corner of the Marvel Universe, mostly outside of the public eye.
I guess that makes sense with the theme of X-Men, because the X-Men are outsiders as a whole.
It's another brilliant twist on the mutant metaphor, with the X-Men's heroics barely noticed or appreciated by the masses.
God damn it.
Claremont will continue to build the scope and depth of his stories moving forward, but even in these first years, the writer uses every adventure to push these new X-Men to their limits and beyond. And as a result, we also see the team grow far closer than their predecessors, with the newfound power of this found family kicking off a series of evolutions for each character. The Mutant X story from issues 126 through 128 gives the perfect climax to this arc, with the team working in perfect harmony to take down the villainous mutant Proteus. But the strongest example of this evolution can be seen through the transformation of Jean Grey, giving her life to save the X-Men only to rise again as the Phoenix, a hero with near limitless psychic power.
I don't know about hero. Maybe anti-hero, at least at the very beginning. Because the Phoenix literally kills millions. I don't know if I would classify that as a hero, to be honest.
Given her more passive role under previous writers, Claremont's Jean feels like the most literal form of empowerment within the book's metaphor, going from kinda sorta levitating stuff to saving whole universes single-handed. Superpowers are, after all, a kind of aspirational empowerment, letting us imagine a society where the oppressed are given the means to fix the world around them. But through Phoenix, Claremont is quick to hint at even more complications to come. It's heroic to want to aspire to something greater, but what happens?
I love how Wolverine has like a little pillow for himself here. He does not give a shit.
When these good but imperfect people are given the power to reshape the world, and how does that power end up shaping them? Claremont's early work on X-Men transformed far more than its cast or stories. While Giant Size was credited with the title's revival, the writer's first 4 years saw steady increases in sales, to the point where X-Men began outpacing their competition at DC in addition to their fellow Marvel titles. The book's success led to its return as a monthly comic, and even saw a name change with issue 114, restoring the classic Uncanny X-Men title to cement its reputation. Unfortunately, Marvel was undergoing an evolution of its own at the time. By 1978, Claremont's direction had started to butt heads with incoming editor-in-chief Jim Shooter, who constantly pushed for a return to the previous status quo, demanding a general softening of Wolverine's violence and a return to the Mutant Academy elements. Shooter's involvement also led to the introduction of Dazzler, a character who, according to Byrne, was meant to set up a joint effort with a record company similar to the Archie.
That explains everything. Okay, I've always thought that Dazzler, she looked like a glam rocker, and I've always thought she looks like something that would appear on like a glam rock album. But hearing that, it's like, okay, that explains her creation. That explains everything about her. I'm not saying that she's not a good character or that she couldn't potentially be a like fantastic hero, but it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Why they chose the X-Men for this, I'll never know. These mandates only worsen the creative conflicts between Claremont and Byrne, who started butting heads over the direction of stories and characters, namely Jean Grey's ongoing arc as Phoenix. Claremont would later reflect,
John and I, in many respects, spoke the same language, the imagination language. We had very divergent options on what should happen with the characters and the story arcs. Occasionally we'd bump into each other. Each of us thought we were right, which made being an editor interesting. But the conflict between us catalyzed really good stories.
Sometimes it does take two heads butting for a good thing to happen. Just saying.
Neither of us ever got exactly what we wanted, but the synergy of what we did get was, more often than not, better than what we started with, and that was worth all the kerfuffle that went into its creation.
ultimately the team were able to toe the line with Shooter's demands, bringing some elements into the book while highlighting how a return to the status quo is completely impossible. Professor X's return as a Father Knows Best figure only chafes against this older, more eclectic group, and it's clear that
It would honestly be weird for Professor X to return back to that role, because, I mean, he is the leader, but he's not a father figure to a lot of them. Like, a lot of them were alive when their fathers were there, and Professor X is also a very flawed character in general, so making him like a Father Knows Best type would immediately like clash with the fact that he makes mistakes. He sometimes misjudges enemies, and sometimes he doesn't know best. But that's okay. That's what makes a good story, that the character who we think knows all the answers doesn't. That creates a very good drama. So yeah, and it's also weird for him to do Father Knows Best with a cast of characters who are all adults. That's very strange.
their power as both a team and individuals are shifting into something beyond the Professor's control. The shift is balanced against the addition of Kitty Pryde, a younger mutant who the duo used to bring back the school and student elements of before, elevating the students into mentors.
What the fuck is with Kitty Pryde's face there? And Storm's face. Oh, they both look so creepy in that panel. Look at her eyes. And look at this mouth. What is going on with both of these guys? Oh, get it off screen.
And giving an intergenerational angle to the mutant metaphor. And instead of diminishing what Claremont and Byrne had built, these additions only deepened readers' connections to the cast.
The most memorable fan letters I would get would be from people who said, what I see with these characters are moments, emotions that remind me of me. They relate to people, they relate to circumstances, they relate to situations. They are like people I know,
Claremont states.
The key is never the power, but the person wielding it. The moment you have that connection, it becomes so much easier to take that next step to, well, if they can save the world, I can save the world.
But most interestingly, Claremont's first act on X-Men culminates around the continued evolution of Phoenix, with Jean seemingly killing the villain Emma Frost in a psychic battle and wiping the minds of Kitty's parents. It's a sobering note to end on, and only hints at the battles to come, with Claremont blurring the old lines between good and evil in favor of more existential battles. And with these shifts comes a bigger focus on the future of mutant kind than ever before. Across 4 years and 38 issues, Claremont and his collaborators gave a new level of depth to the mutant experience, making their cast into something more human, more complex, and more fallible. And yet, despite this fallibility, Claremont's X-Men are also able to channel the transcendent spirit that Lee and Kirby captured in 1963, with their found family giving them the community that society denies them, and the strength to combat an ever-growing roster of oppressors. In a world that feels increasingly overrun by hate and violence, it feels more important than ever to hold on to the spirit of these stories. No matter our race, creed, or gender, we all have the means to stand against bigotry and hatred, to transform the world, and by extension, transform ourselves into something better, something uncanny.
Yeah, that's a good video to end on, I think. But yeah, I think we'll end things there with Chris Claremont. I think we got a good picture of him. So anyways, if you like this stream, be sure to give it a like, share it, leave a comment about your thoughts about it. And yeah, tomorrow we are going to be covering John Romita Sr. and John Romita Jr. for a special post Father's Day episode. So be sure to come back tomorrow at 7:30 to see it. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye.